Hey guys, welcome to the developer interview here at PSVR without Parole. With me today is the man, the myth, the legend. It's Ryan Payton from Camouflaj.
I'm doing great. Yeah, just really happy to be able to talk to you again. It's been a while. Feels like, right? I mean, a year and a half has gone by since we shipped Marvel's Iron Man VR, and it feels like it's really flown by.
I know how the reception was over on our end because, I mean, the gamers, the Without Parole viewers voted it for Game of the Year 2020. So we know how it was on our end. How was the reception over there on your end?
Yeah, we were thrilled with earning you and your team and your community's Game of the Year. We also received a lot of other accolades, which we've been not shameful about plastering all over our website and showing like all the awards that the team got, because it was really important for us to get that jolt of excitement and admiration for the title that we worked so hard on. And at launch, you know, the game was received with some really stellar reviews and some reviews that weren't as positive. You know, and those are always hard to see, right? Especially when you put so much of your life into these products, right? And the team worked so hard, and we worked really close with our partners at Sony and Marvel. And so, but you know, we took the good with the bad and moved forward. We made some great updates to the game, and we're really proud of the game. But then to end 2020, you know, what was it, 3 or 4 months after the fact, with like all these awards and getting nominated for Best VR Game at the Game Awards and be standing alongside other fantastic titles. It was like Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners came out that year. That was great. Half-Life Alyx, obviously, Star Wars Squadron, some other really great titles. So we ended 2020, like, I think, with a bang, and we were so proud of what we were able to create. And yeah, we're just now we're just heads down, just trying to figure out what we're doing next.
Yeah, well, I think I think the world is curious, or at least my little corner of the world is very curious to know what you guys are working on next. You know, I obviously want to talk about Republique, man, because that's the reason for this interview. That's what we're here to talk about. But maybe we come back to that in just a second. Like,
sure.
You guys just opened a new studio in Japan.
Yeah, we expanded here in Japan last summer. We've been holding off on that announcement. We also are really excited to be able to bring some additional talent to the studio. We've now grown to about 80 full-time folks. So like Camouflaj continues to grow and strengthen after the release of Marvel's Iron Man VR. We brought on board like 2 really amazing guys here in Japan. Matt Walker, who was a producer on Devil May Cry 5, was at Capcom for many years, and then Alex O'Smith, who's like a legend in the localization and writing industry, especially for games going all the way back to like Vagrant Story is like I think the one that he really set the world ablaze about. Like, just it kind of changed people's perspective of how writing could be for like a non-English title, right? And what he did with that with his colleagues. He did Final Fantasy VIII, Parasite Eve 2, and then just like Ace Attorney series, and so many titles he can't remember now. He's like that's the point he is where he is in his career. But he was most recently at Moon Studios and working on Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and joined Camouflaj last year. We're thrilled to have him on the writing team on our new project. And yeah, so just, you know, we just feel so lucky that we hit our 10-year anniversary as Camouflaj, as an independent studio. You know, we continue to grow, we continue to strengthen, get smarter about how we're building games, and yeah, when we're doing more of a global expansion, which is really in response to the COVID pandemic in a way, is that COVID, with all the bad things that it has brought, it's also brought some interesting good things to some people in terms of opening their eyes up to the strengths of remote work, myself included, and us realizing that yes, we can actually decentralize and not have everybody working out of our Seattle office. We can have people move to, you know, their hometown, you know, in Michigan, in Arkansas, in Arizona, it doesn't matter, in Montreal, or they can move, or we can hire people around the world, and we're all working remote anyway. And so that was a big impetus for why we opened the Japan studio, is so we can fully embrace like and utilize the talent that there was all over the world, and not just be fully focused on just like the Seattle area, which we were doing up until that point.
So just to clarify, this Camouflaj Holdings, which is the Japan location, will you be working on the same projects as Camouflaj proper, or will they be 2 studios working on separate projects?
Yeah, well, funny enough, we started off with the idea that the Japan studio, which we call it Camouflaj Holdings, was going to be focused on starting up different projects, like a smaller one, and then we kind of grow that team. But over time, I think it made more sense for us to just kind of fully embrace like a global development style for our main project or projects within the studio. And so, yeah, it's all along the lines of like leveraging the international talent that's out there. And also the fact that going back all the way to my work on Metal Gear Solid 4, for example, Brian, back in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, it always bothered me that when you centralize your dev team into like one area, that you are typically only working for between 8 to 12 hours a day on the game, but you're only given a number of years to work on the game. And so, throw weekends out there for a second. You're only working on the game for about half the time that you could be. And those goalposts typically don't move when you got to ship the game.
Right.
So one of the things that's always bothered me is like, how can we better utilize like different time zones around the world so we can be working on the game in 24-hour cycles, and in theory get double the amount of time working on the game, and be able to react to feedback more quickly. So for example, when I wake up, the Seattle team is kind of winding down, and so myself, Matt Walker, Alex O'Smith, we're getting the build. And we're playing in a headset here in this nice open space that we've got, and we play the game. We provide feedback. We kick it over to the team, and we have some people in London now, and then New York wakes up, and then back to Seattle, and then they can respond to the feedback. So we get in this really nice cycle that we weren't afforded previously.
I mean, as great as that excuse is, I think I think you just wanted to move to Japan, and this is the way you made it happen.
Well, what ended up happening, the truth of the matter is, Brian, is that I wasn't intending to do it, but I took a vacation here about a year and a half ago, and I was working remote.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that this could work, because I was doing that. I was just like, okay. And my days, it was the nights in Seattle, and I was giving feedback and stuff like that. I was like, wait a second, this actually might be a good thing. So yeah, definitely like fully embraced that kind of accidental discovery that I had. Granted, Ubisoft has figured this thing out like 10, 15 years ago, so it's not like I'm the first person to come up with this idea of following the sun kind of development cycle and development approach. But it's also, yeah, like as you pointed out too, like a really great excuse to move back here.
Just before you and I sat down to talk, I watched a mini documentary about the making of Republique, and I mean, it's sort of like the game itself. It takes you on a journey, and it's heart-wrenching and exciting and exhilarating, and like you're rooting for the good guys and and really hoping that it's all going to come together for you. Even though here I am in the future, knowing exactly how it ends, I was still like, oh, you guys can do it.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, just for anyone who hasn't seen the documentary, and for is this the documentary that's going to be included with the limited edition, limited run games box?
It's correct. There's a chapter of the longer documentary we've created for the limited edition, which is through limited run. But there's this Republique focused documentary which you've been disclosed on, which is going to go live when Republique VR hits on March 10th on PlayStation VR, Switch, and PlayStation 4. So it's going to go live. I think it's going to be exclusive to IGN for a spell, so people can just jump over there and check it out. I think, like you mentioned, it's about a half an hour long, and it goes through just the roller coaster ride, which was my life, which was the team's life, and I think a pretty honest look at how hard it is to start a studio and to try to make a video game when you have no idea what you're doing.
And you knew what you were doing because you'd had experience on other huge games before. You'd worked at a couple AAA studios, and so you knew how to make games, but running a studio is a little bit different, right?
Well, I thought I knew what I was doing. And I think people around me thought I knew what I was doing. Because, yeah, I could say, and I would do this too, I would say, oh, from the producer from Metal Gear Solid 4 and the former creative director from Halo. I mean, on the box, like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. But what I realized over time was that me being so high level on those titles really was great for my career. I was 27 years old when I became creative director on Halo 4.
Wow, that's impressive.
And it was only my fifth year into true game development, right? And I had never gone through the experience of, okay, you're a junior designer, you're a junior producer, you're a junior artist, sit down, junior engineer, sit down, this is how you make a video game, you're going to work on the small part, and then you're going to grow into this thing, and you're going to grow into this thing, you're going to grow into. I started with faking it till you make it and giving direction on a PlayStation portable game called Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops. And that's how I got my big break. Is I think the team and Hideo Kojima and others like noticed that I had a knack for direction. So I was good at that side. But then, so I get more or less pushed out of Microsoft for reasons I think are totally legitimate now that I look back at it. I was upset at the time, and my ego was bruised. And so I left, started my own studio, liquidated all my Microsoft stock at $25 a share, which looking back now was maybe not the best use of that stock. But we liquidated all my assets, my life savings, my 401k at a 50% tax penalty, started Camouflaj, and with a chip on my shoulder, thinking I knew what I was doing. And what I realized over the next 2-3 years, especially as we try to work towards bringing episode 1 to market, is that I had no idea how to build the foundation, how to do like the actual real work that goes into making a video game. And so I'm learning on the fly while I'm also working with a lot of junior folks who this is their first game job out of school. Some guys first game job and hadn't even gone to school for it. So you've got the blind leading the blind, basically. And it was just by pure like force of will and leaning on some of our more talented and experienced staff members that we were able to bring over time to do that all on a very nascent platform in which we didn't know, like nobody knew how to do a premium, high quality stealth action game you can play with one finger on an iPhone. It was just, I'll tell you and your audience something I never told anybody. I had a phone call with Ken Levine about 9 months before episode 1 shipped for Republique. And he and I would exchange emails and do phone calls over the years. And when I told him what I was up to, he was like, Ryan, you're doing hard on top of hard on top of hard on top of hard. You gotta you gotta balance out what you're doing. You can't just take risk. You gotta balance risk out with like safety stuff too. That's a good leader. That's like a good business leader. And I totally ignored his feedback, and we just did hard on top of hard, and we survived somehow. And we're really lucky and fortunate that Republic turned out as well as it did.
You touched a little bit on the fact that this game has gone through multiple platforms and starting on iOS, so it's a touch screen, it's phones, it's tablets, that kind of thing, right? So how faithful do you think the PSVR version is to that original vision?
Well, we didn't initially think that the Republic was going to go to every single platform under the sun. My colleagues love to joke with me that if I could put the game onto a refrigerator or one of those little like touch panels you have at like restaurants like Red Robin and Olive Garden, they have like Bejeweled and stuff like on there, I would put it on there. In fact, I did reach out to that company to ask them if we could work with them to bring Republic to a Chili's near you. Turns out they weren't very interested, which is a huge bummer, and I lost a bet with my team about that. In fact, I should answer your question, but I'm going to still just have fun with this. As part of like the most impressive troll that my team has ever performed on me. One morning, I woke up, went to the office, email comes in, and it's from the Ziosk platform, the company behind those tablets at these chain restaurants. Yeah. And it's like, Ryan, we're so sorry for not getting back to you. We're so excited about bringing Republic to like a Chili's near you and Red Robin. We think like, can we like get Red Robin into the game as like a playable character? I'm like, this is amazing. This is like, guys, I won the bet. You guys, I told you that these guys would be interested. And then like they're just laughing, and I look, and the email's from like ziosk@gmail.com or something. It's like a total troll. So yes, I'm totally willing to put our game on any kind of platform, but I didn't expect it to work as well as it did on VR. And I'll give you a little bit of background on how we got there. Is that, as you mentioned, our game started off as an iOS game, then it went to PC on Steam, then it went to PlayStation 4. And then we thought it was kind of finished. We released all 5 episodes. We're moving on to our next title, which we're starting to talk a little more publicly about, but we were working on a Battle Royale game, a multiplayer title with a subsidiary of Square Enix that never saw the light of day, obviously. And that was a big bummer because we were working on that before Battle Royale even took off. It was arguably too early. But anyway, we were working on that title, and then we get a phone call from Oculus, and Jason Rubin and his team were looking for titles to bring to their VR platforms, and they said, and they were looking for existing titles that would translate well into VR. And they said that Republic was on a short list that they came up with amongst their team. And we were obviously really honored and flattered that they would even think about that. So they reached out to us. They helped us bring the game to initially to the Gear VR platform and to the Oculus Go platform. And as we were working on the game, I think they were right. The game fits really, really nicely for VR. The vision of like being inside the surveillance camera, that you're directing a third-person character with that sense of presence that VR affords, but also allowing players to be in a static position and then just teleport and warp in a way that's like contextual to the fiction of the world that we built, worked so well that I think as we're going through development, a lot of the guys on the team, myself included, started thinking, I think VR is like the definitive way to play this game. Now, not everybody believes that. Like some people prefer the Switch version, some people prefer the PlayStation 4 version, some people prefer the touch-focused version on mobile or the PC mouse and keyboard version. But personally, it's the VR experience, and I'm just so thrilled with how it translated, and it's translated really nicely to PlayStation VR.
Yeah, I think we've had conversations before, and I've been quoted on Gamescast because I have no filter. Basically saying that I just really didn't like the flat screen version. And I might have used some choice words to describe how much I didn't like it.
I remember that, yeah.
And so, one of the things that I love and hate about without Parole is that I have to play everything. Otherwise, if you're a gamer and you're playing VR games, you choose the ones that you want to play. And if it's not in a genre that you're not interested in, you skip it. You may not even consider it. And I'm really, really thankful that I finally get to experience Republique, and possibly in its definitive form. I think as soon as you sent the key over, I jumped in and tried and played a little bit, and I was amazed. I was like, there's something very personal about playing this game, which is crazy because it's a game about not having any personal space, about your whole life being in front of cameras and your personal information being sold and this and that. Meanwhile, I'm feeling like a personal connection with the characters because of VR. Feeling connection with Hope and a responsibility to take care of her that I never felt when I tried the PlayStation 4 version. And I was surprised, and it was that feeling that grabbed me right away that kept pushing me throughout the course of the rest of the game. As of this interview, I still have to get through the final chapter, so I don't know how the story ends, but I'm loving the story so far, and I'm so happy that I finally had a way to convince me to play it, and it happened to be VR was the way.
I'm not surprised to hear you say this about the VR version. It's something that we see quite a bit, is that for those who were looking for something a little bit more immersive than the flat screen version of the game, VR seems to provide that extra level of immersion or just involvement that some players are looking for. And what I mean by that is this: is that Republic started off as a game for iPhone 4s, right? And you could play it with one touch, with one finger. And we wanted to do an immersive stealth action game with a heavy story component in a world in which publishers and venture capital funds were all telling us that nobody wants to play story-driven content on their phone. They don't want to experience stories on their phone. Netflix wasn't really much of a thing at that point. Everybody was just saying, I just want to play a few rounds of a puzzle game on the bus, and that's what I want to use my mobile device for.
Right.
And me and the team were just thinking, no, that's not, mobile devices are going to be much bigger, and there's lots of different opportunities for this, and we want to do something different. But we had to make sure that the game was accessible on mobile in particular, because you don't have 17 buttons to work, right? So that was the baseline for this game that we developed. So as we brought it to more, if you will, hardcore platforms like PC and Steam and PlayStation 4, I think that the story and the complexity of the story was appropriate, and the audience was looking for that, hungry for it, and really loved it. But the gameplay was fairly simple for them compared to other games they're playing on PC and console. And that's where VR comes in. I think VR helps make the game's input and it increases the immersion factor of it, and I think bolsters the moment to moment in a way that I think we're struggling to find ways of doing that on the flat screen version. That's not to say that the flat screen versions aren't great, and we have a lot of team members and fans that just love that as well. But for me, it's being able to use my head as a surveillance camera and warp around the world and control her and do things that, to a degree that I'm just not able to do on flat screen.
I did experience a few oddities while I was playing a few, I think controlling Hope with an analog stick is like for the most part pretty good, but there's some weirdness to it. Like how much did you have to stop yourself from just going in and being like reinventing the wheel when you're like, we're going to put this on PlayStation VR and God, this is the 10th anniversary of Republic, right? So like over the course of these 10 years, you must have been like constantly thinking about things that you wanted to change. Was it hard not to go back in and just start reworking it from the ground up?
Yeah, so the playing the game on PlayStation VR with the controller, with the DualShock, was something I look forward to because it just brings back all these memories for me. And even though we're working with our new development partners on this title, which is SkyMap, they did a great job with bringing the game to PlayStation VR. And so they were looking for feedback from me, so I put PlayStation VR headset, go back into the world, and I would identify bugs, because there's bugs when you're working on games, obviously. But I would also just sit there and think, do we spend the time to redo this thing, or do we change this thing? Because it's hard. It's hard not to feed into that urge. Because we're older and we're wiser developers now. And Brian, I let myself think for probably too much time about what I could do or what the team could do if we just like remade Republic, right? With the strengths and the technology that we have right now. We don't have the capacity to do that right now. I don't think it would be the right decision. So we're with the game, we try to keep it faithful as best as we could to the original, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Camouflaj. It's actually technically, I know it's confusing, we call it Republic Anniversary Edition because it might seem like it's a 10-year anniversary of Republic, but it's really just celebrating the 10th anniversary of Camouflaj. But we're coming up right on the 10th anniversary of our Kickstarter of Republic, which is what a lot of people know us for and really put us on the map, right?
Yeah. If we're able to talk about this, there's 100 pieces of optional developer commentary strewn throughout the course of Republic.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I don't think we've talked about it publicly, but I figure by the time this is going live, we can. But yeah, it's nothing super secret. It's just that we have a really fun feature in the game that you can turn on the options menu, and this is development commentary. And you talk about voyeurism. This stuff is awesome, I have to say. So over the course of development of that game for 4 years, anytime I felt like there was an interesting conversation that me as a player would be interested in hearing a developer talk about or argue about, I would just turn on I would let the team know. I said, okay, I'm recording this. And I just hit the record button on my phone, put it in the middle of like the conference table, and we would just go. And then one of our external colleagues, he had the unfortunate job of listening to all of these clips and having to shave out like little snippets of stuff that was really interesting to him as a non-developer. So we went through hundreds of hours of stuff, of content, and then we picked out those about 100 of those or so, and we sprinkled them throughout the game for players to scan, and they can hear like real conversations that we're having from the team about these moments that you just experienced. And so it's different than your kind of more retrospective kind of commentary you would get like in a DVD or something like that from a director or something like that. These are conversations and debates we're talking about like, no, it should not be here. This is stupid, or that's confusing for the player. This is lots of interesting kind of drama that takes place. Obviously, all approved by the team before it went out there, but it was very much in line with the theme of like the kind of the voyeuristic nature of Republic. And sorry, on top of that, with the 10th anniversary of Camouflaj Celebration Edition that we have here, we sprinkled in some new additional commentary where we do the retrospectives, where we say, okay, now that it's been so many years since we shipped these games, like now that we're older and a little bit wiser, we're looking back at some of our fondest memories and sharing those as well as part of a special thing that's never been done up until now in the game.
That's pretty impressive, man, that you had the foresight to say, hey, people are going to want to hear these conversations at some point in the future. And I wanted to experience everything on my first playthrough, and I ended up turning them off. I played the first 20, 30 minutes of the game, experienced what the developer commentary was all about, and then kept thinking, I'm really interested in this. and I want to find every single one. The game's a collectathon. I mean, the game you probably consider it a stealth game more than anything else, but I'm personally saying stealth plays second fiddle to the massive collectathon that is Republic.
Yep.
Constantly, like, I mean, you're scanning everything. You're learning about each of the guards that you're passing by. It's literally just items everywhere, and I mean, and I love collectathons, so I was having a blast with it. But then on top of it, to be like, okay.
Then there's that stuff too, the developer commentary.
Well, because I think the best and worst thing about your game, I'm just going to be honest right here, right? The best and worst thing about your game is that there's so much lore to take in, and there's so much dialogue, and so there's a part of me that wants to snuggle up with this game with a Vita in bed and just kind of and take it all in, and every time Hope starts talking, just stop and let her talk, or anytime an audio recording starts playing, just stop and let them talk and take it all in. But the gamer in me in VR goes, all right, let's move this shit along, man, because like
Sure.
There's 7 items in this room, and I just got to scan this and scan that and scan that and scan that, and if I have stopped and listened to the entire audio log for each one of those, my 2 hour per chapter playtime is now going to be 4 hours per chapter playtime. Add developer commentary onto that is like,
yep.
Hey man, I'm never finishing this game. So I decided at one point, I was like, I'm gonna play through the game, get the basic gist of it, get most of the story, turn off developer commentary, and then I'm gonna play through it again, man, because especially once I get to the halfway point and the story started really picking up for me, I think people will be divided. I think people halfway through, people will say, "What the hell are they doing?" Or "This is great. I can't wait to see what happens next." I fell into the camp of "This is great. I can't wait to see what happens next." And so now I'm like super excited to go back and play it from the beginning again, and just like and see and really pay attention to some of those things I sort of skipped by. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't
Totally.
I don't know how you would
Totally
have done it
legitimate
differently.
feedback. Well, probably less writing, less verbose scenes. It's something I felt going through the game with a lot more of an objective look at it over the years. Because when you're in it, you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to be objective. And everything is your baby. And you care, and anything that people say where, like, oh yeah, this scene is too long, like, but you understand what's going on in this important moment. Like, or like, we worked really hard on this, right?
Right.
But as time goes on, you can kind of separate yourself from, I'm sure it's like how when you're looking at your channel and you're looking at content you created years ago, and you're like, yeah, I was pretty proud of that at the time, but like I would change this to that once you're. I
would delete half of it, to be honest with you.
Or delete half of it. So we did do a little bit of trimming here and there for Republic and Republic VR, but for the most part, yeah, it's pretty authentic to what we created at the time, and I think that's totally like valid critique of the game. I think it's not one of those games where you're like, okay, I've got like 30 minutes to play. I'm just going to jump into the world of Republic on PlayStation VR, and then I'm gonna go do something else really quickly.
Which makes me wonder, why did you think this was going to work at Chili's? I'm so confused. This is not the kind of thing you play in short little 10-minute bursts.
You're totally right. It would be most players. I mean, I would only really do it, Brian, because for a joke, and I'll go pretty far for a joke. But I mean, if only so I could see like a test scene of like a family, where I work with the Ziosk platform executives, and we go to like see like on a test viewing of a family about Republic. They're gonna last for like 3 minutes because the game isn't like instant gratification. Like the opening itself is like 10 minutes long, right? And I would just be laughing the entire time. But to respond to your I think very, very valid critique. I think it's a game that you set some time aside. You're ready to kind of take in like a pretty deep and narrative experience, and I also think that your approach to the developer commentaries is like how I would go about it as well. And if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little bit about the design, the interesting design challenge that we had about the developer commentary.
Yeah, please.
It's because what we found was that we had developer commentary previously in some previous versions. It wasn't all the developer commentary that we have exclusive to this version. But when we had it before, it was by default turned off because people were getting overwhelmed. But what we found was it was really hard to just remind the player that exists, because it's just in the options menu. Not everybody looks in the options menu. So what we opted to do for this title is that we have it on by default to make it very clear to the player that this feature is there. And then my hope is actually that they do either play through it with it on, maybe if they've already played the game on another platform and now they're getting a new perspective on the game in VR, and they get to kind of enjoy the world and see the art in a perspective they've never seen before and get the narrative or the developer stories, and that's great. Or for first-time players like yourself, turn the darn stuff off because you got enough to worry about. And then when you go through a second playthrough, at least you know it's there if you want to try to experience it that way.
And I mean, you priced this game amazingly well. It's a $15 game, and you play through it once, it's going to be at least 10 hours, especially if you stop and smell the roses and listen to all the audio, if not longer. I'm assuming if you really take your time, each episode could definitely take upwards of like 2.5 hours. I think I was doing pretty good at 2 hours a piece. But again,
that's about right.
There was a little bit of skipping going on there.
Yep.
I was editing the game for you on the way. Ryan, I feel like I'm keeping you long past our scheduled allotted time here. But I do have a few questions from some of the cats out there if you have a few minutes.
Oh, please, let's do it.
All right. Josh76 over on Discord asks, what elements or lessons have you learned or incorporated from Iron Man VR? Now, he asked this in reference to Republique, but let's change it around a little bit and say what lessons or elements from that you learned from Iron Man VR do you think that you'll implement in future games?
Well, I mean, I think that our experience shipping Iron Man VR before shipping Republic VR on PlayStation VR is still relevant to a degree. I mean, we just got so familiar with the platform, and so just in terms of like how elements are being presented into the game, ensuring that we try to reduce aliasing, for example, as a simple example. But I think we just became just wiser and smarter about how we built things, and again we worked with great partners to help us realize that as well. But to answer your question, Brian, it seems like with every game we work on, it's just a crash course on something wild and crazy that people haven't done before. And truly, Republic was that way. It really was that way, especially when it first launched. So many new things that we didn't have a roadmap. We couldn't look at other things. We just had to discover it on our own and work through all of those things to come to a solution. And that's really where a lot of innovation comes from. But it's also where a lot of like pain and suffering comes from as well. And that's in a nutshell is a lot of what we had to go through for Iron Man VR as well. There wasn't another superhero high-flying action combat game in VR that we could really look to to help us answer a lot of questions that we were faced with. And so we spent a lot of development time just discovering. And I'm really proud of what we were able to come up with, but that was really hard. And so I think without getting too much into like what we're working on right now, I think just in general, we are less surprised by new challenges that we face in VR. We're trying to do things. I think we take a pretty stoic approach to things, and we're patient about them. And we obviously are leveraging the experience that we had. But rather, it's kind of like, I don't know, just imagining like such a weird like way to put it, but like, you know, when you see like Old Snake in Metal Gear Solid 4, it's like he's kind of seen it all, but like terrible things are happening in front of him, like really difficult things are happening, but he's like, yeah, I've got this, you know? And I kind of feel like our team is becoming more like that, you know? And we have more confidence, and like we've seen a lot of stuff. And we're not intimidated by now, and we just barrel in and we go do the work, and we find solutions faster, I think, than we were to do. Previous, I should say.
That Chicken asks if you have plans for another large licensed VR game, and if you can't answer that, maybe you can tell us the difference between working on something with an original IP that you have full creative control over versus working on a licensed property of somebody else's.
Sure, yeah. Like I said early on in our discussion, I had a chip on my shoulder. I was embarrassed about being demoted and eventually pushed out on Halo. And it was really important to me at the time that we were fully independent and we're just doing whatever we wanted to do. And I took full advantage of that, and I think the team did as well. I'm really proud of what we built. And that was part of the DNA of the company for the first 4 or 5 years. And so when the opportunity arose of us potentially working on an Iron Man game, we're talking about working with the biggest entertainment companies in the world, with Marvel, you know, part of Disney. And I remember being a little nervous about that. And out of the gate, I wasn't the easiest guy to work with, and I don't think we were the best partner to work with because I think we still had that like fiercely independent spirit, in which we would push back on things that maybe most teams wouldn't push back on, but because we're just so adamant about it being like our game and our story and what we wanted. But over time, I think I realized that we're better when we're pushed. We're better when we work with other partners and who are challenging us. And I had some boneheaded ideas out of the gate for Iron Man VR that I thank God that Marvel pushed back on and helped us find a better solution for. And so for me, as I think I've gotten older, and I think as a team gotten older, I think that we followed a path that a lot of people follow as they develop in their careers, as they develop as adults. Is that you basically you first start off as you're independent, or so you're first off very, very dependent as a child, but you become a teenager and now you're independent. But a lot of people kind of stick in that mode, and that's kind of what we were with Camouflaj. We were like, we're independent and we're independent, right? But I think the next step in evolution and maturation for a lot of people is interdependency. That's where people sometimes decide to get married, or they take on more partnerships. So they try to become more inclusive, and they realize that it might be easier. It might feel like it's easier to do something on your own. You can do something even better when you collaborate really well with other people. And so that's why, whether it's like what we're working on now or in the future, working on an established IP or with like a larger partner again is not a daunting thing. I'm not discouraged by it. In fact, I'm excited about those opportunities, while also sometimes wanting to have our own little thing too, to just kind of noodle on the side and not have to worry about anything. It's always good to have your own little side projects too, right?
Hopefully growing the studio will allow you to do a little of column A and a little of column B.
That would be fun.
And finally, I think this is really sweet. Twitcher, the EFG Boopcat, said, ask Ryan to give Coco a pat on the head from him. He must have seen our last interview.
Man. Yeah, that's really nice of Twitcher. Man, it's I really like tear up just thinking about that. Yeah, I just love like how much you and your audience love those little furry creatures. I won't bore you and your audience with like the crazy story of bringing Coco. So for those who don't know, we had two cats, two black cats, domestic short hairs. Mother and daughter, or the daughter passed away. Her name was Coco when she was about 10 years old. Year-long battle with cancer, really tough. But we still have her mom, Mocha, and we're really thrilled to have her. She's 14 years old right now. The crazy story, though, is bringing her to Japan and all the paperwork required to do that, and getting her on the flight, going through security, going through SFO, holding her because you can't put her into like the bag go through the X-ray scanner because she might have a bomb on her or whatever. So like holding her in this crowded airport with like no leash on and like worried about her like scratching me and just like escaping. Crazy experience going across like a 12-hour flight and everything. But she made it safe and sound, and she's doing pretty good with her Japanese lessons. And probably still very confused about where she is, but we're very thrilled to have her with us, and I appreciate you asking about your audience member Twitcher asking about Coco.
And now you got me wondering if Japanese cat food tastes different than American cat food.
Well, I couldn't tell you, but she seems to like it, so that's as far as I'm willing to go to find out whether it's better or not.
Ryan, thank you so much for hanging out with me yet again and spending all this time talking about Camouflaj and Republique and Iron Man and just kind of a little bit of everything. It's always really a pleasure to sit down and shoot the shit with you, man. Like, you're always very forthcoming, very transparent, and as you said, our audience appreciates that, and I certainly appreciate that too. So thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, also to your colleagues, Dave and AJ, please send my regards to your community. I love what you guys do. You, Brian, you and your colleagues and your audience in my opinion, is a big reason why PlayStation VR 2 is coming. PlayStation VR could have just been a one-time experiment for Sony, and they could have moved on. But they saw enough excitement and interest and passion and opportunity to do a second round, and it's so exciting to see what they're announcing. And And again, I think you guys play a big part in it, because if there wasn't excitement and there wasn't an audience, there wasn't people asking for it, they wouldn't do it, right? And so, I can't wait for all that stuff to start, more information to come out, for you guys to start playing content, and for the channel to continue to grow. Because I have to imagine this is a kind of a drier period for content, right? As we're between cycles, right?
It's a little dry. Yeah.
But guess what? Coming March 10th, you've got a 10-hour plus experience called Republic VR that we've worked really hard on with our partners over at Darkwind and Sky Map. Really proud of the game. Hope you guys enjoy it. And I appreciate you playing it, Brian, and for your great feedback on the game.
Well, thanks, man. And thanks for all the kind words, too. I really do appreciate that. And of course, we can't end this interview without asking you to just give us a big meow and swipe for all the cats out there.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Meow. Play Republic VR on PlayStation VR.
I like it. Good plug.